Hey everyone, welcome back. It feels like everywhere you turn these days, there's another headline screaming about, you know, inflation or the national debt. And
Yeah.
honestly, it could be kind of overwhelming. Like, is the
Terrible.
US dollar about to totally crash? Is this the end of, the dollar's reign as the world's top currency? So we're doing a deep dive today on this video that we found that really gets into all of this.
Yeah.
And they make some pretty bold claims. So we really want to break it all down and see if you know what they're saying holds water.
Yeah. I mean, it's a pretty dramatic, kind of picture they paint
Yeah.
when you first watch it. But let's start with the big scary numbers, right? The national debt.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they throw out this number right off the bat. It's something like 34
Over $34 trillion
trillion.
with a T.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
And
hard to even fathom, right?
yeah, how do you even wrap your head around that number? And then on top of that, they talk about all this money printing that the government's been doing.
Yep.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Not historically good for currency.
Yeah. If you just keep printing more and more money, it's doesn't it make the money that's already out there worth less?
Exactly. And that ties directly into inflation. I mean, you're feeling it, I'm feeling it. Every time we go to the grocery store, try to fill up our gas tanks, it's like,
Yeah, it's crazy. The video actually mentions this too. We're at a 40-year high for inflation,
yeah,
which is kind of alarming when you think about it.
yeah. And it just eats away at everyone's purchasing power, right? Your money just doesn't go as far as it used to. So I think, between that and the debt and the whole money printing thing, it's no wonder people are getting nervous about the dollar.
Yeah, for sure. But okay, so the video doesn't just predict doom and gloom, you know. They also talk about why the dollar has actually stayed pretty strong despite all these things that we just talked about.
Right.
And one of the big reasons they mention is just how much global trade still happens in U.S. dollars.
It's the world's reserve currency for a reason.
Yeah, it's everyone's just kind of used to using it.
It's like the default setting, yeah.
Yeah. So even if there are, some concerns, it's not like there's a clear alternative just waiting in the wings.
Exactly. And, a big part of that is trust. The U.S.
Huh.
financial system, it's not perfect. It's got its problems, but it's still seen as relatively stable compared to a lot of other options out there.
Right. The euro has had its own issues, right?
Exactly. And the Chinese yuan, for example, it's not fully convertible on the global market, so that limits its appeal. So for now, at least, it seems like the dollar still has this kind of, I don't know, legacy advantage.
Yeah, it's been the top dog for so long that it's hard to imagine anything else taking its place, even if there are some, cracks showing. But then the video brings up this idea of de-dollarization,
Yeah.
which I thought was super interesting. It's
Oh.
basically countries are starting to look for ways to use the dollar less in international trade.
Right. They want to reduce their dependence on it.
Yeah. And they gave the example of the BRICS nations.
Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa.
Yeah. They're doing more and more trade with each other, using their own currencies.
Right.
So what does that actually mean if that trend continues?
I mean, it could mean a pretty big shift in global power, right?
Mhm.
Instead of just having one dominant currency, we could end up in a world where, there are multiple major currencies all competing with each other.
Okay, so what would that look like? Good, bad?
It's hard to say for sure. I mean, more competition could theoretically be good for consumers, but it would definitely make the global financial system a lot more complex and probably a lot more volatile. And it could definitely shake up the existing power structures. The U.S. has benefited a lot from having the world's reserve currency.
Yeah.
If that changes, it could have ripple effects all over the world.
Yeah, that makes sense. So we've got the big picture global stuff,
Yeah.
but the video also gets into, what all this means for us regular folks just trying to,
Manage our money.
manage our money. Exactly.
Mhm.
And they talk about this idea of diversifying your assets, not putting all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah.
And they specifically mention things like investing in gold or real estate or even Bitcoin as a way to kind of hedge against a potential dollar decline.
Yeah.
So as an expert, what do you think about that?
Well, diversification is always a smart move.
Yeah.
It's just good financial planning. Whether or not the dollar collapses, spreading your risk is never a bad idea. As for the specific assets, they all come with their own pros and cons. Gold has traditionally been seen as a safe haven, but it can fluctuate in price. Real estate is a good long-term investment usually, but it's not very liquid, right? You can't just quickly cash out if you need to. And Bitcoin, Well, it's highly speculative. It can go way up, but it can also crash hard. So I think the key is to really understand your own risk tolerance and your financial goals before you jump into anything.
Yeah, for sure. The video also talks a lot about interest rates.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, I don't always understand how that, like, impacts me personally. The Federal Reserve has been raising rates to try to control inflation. But I'm like, okay, but what does that actually mean for my wallet?
Yeah. So basically, when the Fed raises interest rates, it makes it more expensive for banks to borrow money. And then they pass that cost on to us, the consumers, through things like higher interest rates on mortgages, car loans, credit cards, that kind of thing.
So it's like a chain reaction.
Exactly. But it's not all bad news. You might also see a little bit of an increase in the interest you earn on your savings accounts. So it really depends on your individual financial situation, whether you're more impacted by the higher borrowing cost or the potential for slightly higher returns on your savings.
Got it. Okay. And then, of course, there's the stock market. The video kind of hints that a weaker dollar could lead to more stock market volatility.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Well, it's complicated, right? Like most things in finance. But a weaker dollar can actually be a good thing for some U.S. companies because it makes their products cheaper for buyers in other countries, which can boost exports. But on the other hand, it also makes imports more expensive, which contributes to inflation and can potentially hurt corporate profits. So it's hard to say for sure what the overall impact on the stock market would be.
Right. So basically everything's connected.
Pretty much, yeah. The global economy is this complex web of interconnected systems.
Okay, so just to kind of sum things up, it sounds like a total collapse of the U.S. dollar might not be happening tomorrow,
Right.
but there are definitely some serious challenges and things are changing.
Exactly. It's not like a doomsday scenario, but we are seeing this shift in the global landscape with the emergence of alternative currencies and new trading systems. It's definitely something to keep an eye on.
And I thought it was really interesting how the video ended. They asked this question like, what would a world without the U.S. dollar as the dominant currency even look like? Like, what would that do to global trade, geopolitics, even just our everyday lives?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, right? Like it's hard to even imagine. But we might see a more multipolar world with several major currencies all kind of vying for influence. Regional trade blocs could become more important. The whole balance of global power could shift. It's really fascinating to think about.
Yeah. Well, I think the big takeaway for our listeners is to stay informed, right? Do your own research.
Absolutely.
Pay attention to what's happening in the world. And, in terms of your personal finances, diversification is key.
Yeah.
And just be prepared for a potentially bumpy ride.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. And, at the end of the day, the future of finance is something that we all have a role in shaping. So understanding these trends, making informed decisions about your own money, that's more important than ever. Yeah.
Couldn't have said it better myself. All right, that's it for our deep dive today. Until next time.